Good, thank you. I'm so pleased to be chatting with you about my little baby, my little disco baby.
Well, let's talk about the shiny, bright new baby that you got going on.
The baby that I haven't seen in hard copy yet. I'm still waiting for my first box full of books, but they promised me they're on their way, so I'm excited to see it. But I've seen it as a PDF, and I'm very excited about it. It's going to be fun.
Tell us all about it. How did the idea begin? How long have you been working on this project?
I wanted to do a book on disco for a really long time, and at one point, I just was at the height of collecting mania. You know where they say you're not a hoarder if your stuff is cool. Well, I'm someone I have tons of things that I collect, and one of the things I have some of are disco artifacts, and a lot of them are from when I was a kid. I was just in my mid-teens when disco was at its height, and so I have a disco mug, I have my Snoopy disco sheets, I have my disco lunchbox to school. And so I had a lot of these things. I realized going along that I wanted to do something more serious than that when I came back around to the topic of. And I had done a book on drag and showbiz that came out in 2019. And people said it was that looked at and shed light on an underappreciated, even though drag is everywhere, people weren't taking it quite as seriously. It was the parsley on the plate. It wasn't the meat and potatoes. It was always the thing that added a little something. They weren't really in the mainstream being talked about seriously. And that did really nicely for me. The book was very well received. And then I started thinking, well, what do I have in my life that I've always loved and deserved to be taken seriously? And I thought kind of what was in the zeitgeist, and it really did feel like disco was making a comeback. And so I started putting together my thoughts on disco and started doing research. And the more I looked, the more people were getting excited about it. And the whole disco sucks phenomenon that many of us lived through, where we were made to feel ashamed for liking back in the late 70s, 1979, the high point of that. We didn't have to feel that way anymore because the YMCA was inducted into the Library of Congress, and every time you turned on the TV, there was a disco song used as the soundtrack to a commercial or on a show you were watching. And then Sam Smith recorded Donna Summer's song "I Feel Love," which, if you ask me, is the greatest disco song ever. The original, the Donna Summer, is the greatest disco song ever. And it was the Target store's Christmas song for 2019, and it was the song. You couldn't escape "I Feel Love." And I thought, okay, this is just out there in the air, and I really need to look at this. And so I just dug in. Some people call it doing research. I call it going down the YouTube rabbit hole and getting to go on the internet and look at all of these amazing clips, and read as much as you can, and then to find the folks who were there and made it happen. That was my next task, and I got to do that. And I started with someone who's on my speed dial, which is Felipe Rose, the Native American from the Village People. He was a big supporter when I was doing Sirius XM radio, and he would call in and he would do his woo 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 war whoop that he was known for. And so he was I wouldn't say he's not someone I'd call when I have a problem at 3 a.m, but he's a dear and I can get in touch with him if I need to. So I started with him, and from there, that led to Gloria Gaynor, and then that led to Thelma Houston, to France Jolie, and on and on and on. And so it was this pretty amazing process. People talk about, oh, are you ever going to retire? From what? From listening to disco and watching drag queens before that. I mean, it's the greatest thing to be able to write books like this, because it's fun to either relive stuff or, even better, to discover things you had no idea existed, which is what happened with the disco book.
So that's would be my next question. When you go down to that YouTube rabbit hole, what are some of the things that you were surprised to discover about the era that you weren't aware of?
The thing that was most amazing to me about the disco era was how much it afforded people who were not disco the ability to put a record out, and to even sometimes have a hit record. There were people who were like Discotheques and the Sexolettes, which is one of the best. They had a song called "Get Dancing," and then another one called "I Want to Dance with You." And not with you, it's with you. And the guy was this talk show personality named Monty Rock III, and he's still with us. Last time we checked, living in Las Vegas, and he just spoke this stream of consciousness, and it was hilarious. And they sort of set it to music. He's the guy who plays the DJ in Saturday Night Fever, and it was based on the success of this song that he got cast. But he's the kind of guy who says, I dig your polyester look, and he has one where he says, "Darling, my wig is wet, my chiffon is wet," and and he's just talking about. But they set it to a disco beat, and it's hilarious. He had songs. There were porn stars who like Marilyn Chambers, who was an infamous porn star. She had a disco record. Bill Cosby has a disco record called Disco Bill, if we can talk about someone infamous.
Yeah.
And it was there are other comedians who had disco records. There were just personalities who came up with things. People on Star Trek, the original series, had disco records. The woman who played Yeoman Janice Rand with the woven hair on Star Trek in the first season had a song called Disco Trekkin'. And I think what's different about my book, I know what's different about this book, is that it not only embraces music that's amazing, like Donna Summer, like the Bee Gees, like Gloria Gaynor, but it also has a soft spot for stuff that's good bad, not just good. And
Yeah.
I think that with anything in life, not only disco music, I think with anything, you should not only appreciate stuff that's fantastic and good and Oscar worthy, but also things that are sort of Razzie worthy, that are terrible but wonderful. And disco had its share of that, and I don't make any judgment. In fact, I like the bad stuff even better. When I talk in the book about disco movies, I drove my husband crazy because he does not think this way. I said to him well, Skate Town USA, which was the Patrick Swayze's movie debut from Dirty Dancing, Patrick Swayze. And I said, oh, well, Skate Town USA is better than Roller Boogie because Roller Boogie is a better movie. I said, Skate Town is a way worse movie, so it's way better. And he looked at me like, you're out of your head. And I said, no, you don't understand. I said, they're both kind of terrible, but one is good terrible, and one's just kind of a hit and a miss. It's just a swing and a miss, rather. But Skate Town USA is so perfectly terrible that everyone should watch it. It's amazing in its badness. But it's just fun, and I think you get a lot more, particularly out of the disco experience, if you not only embrace the good but also embrace the good bad.
What about disco, in your opinion, was able to really captivate the entire nation, also around the world, right in that period? Besides, of course, the fun, the excitement, the colors, and the music, the movies, a lot came out on that area. But what else do you feel like was resonating with people?
I think the songs are generally about empowerment, and it was a time of great change. There's a wonderful PBS documentary, a BBC and PBS documentary called Disco Soundtrack of a Revolution, which was on over the summer. And it talks about how groups were making great strides. And it was the queer community, people of color, and women, and they were really sort of asserting their own power and coming into their own as minority groups, even though women aren't really because there are more women than men, and we just treat them like a minority group. But they were having making great strides, and disco was offering anthems that said things like it's like we're hearing now at the Democratic National Convention, that we're not going back. And there's that song Ain't No Stopping Us Now, that wonderful disco song, and that really embodied the seriousness of disco. It wasn't all just a disco inferno that was just having fun, but it was that feeling of we're making great strides and we're celebrating that and we're going to go forward. And of course, it was right before awful tragedy of AIDS to arrive, so there was this euphoric feeling before all of that happened. And at that point, no one thought there was they thought the only way was up, and as if there were going to be no setbacks. And of course, there was a terrible of the AIDS crisis. So many amazing people, which is why I dedicated the book without saying it in a way that might make people sad right at the beginning. I said, for those who remember to dance and those who dance to remember. And I think that, that's who I was thinking about when I wrote so many people. It starts out with Sylvester, an early AIDS activist, despite on the side of being, perhaps the ultimate queen of disco, even though Donna Summer disagreed. But Sylvester, like, he used to say that Donna wasn't the queen of disco, he was. So, but did I answer your question there? I hope I did.
You answered and you gave me much, much more. So
Yeah, it's that's the whole philosophy. That's me in general, but it's also the philosophy of the book. I tell people, I said it's the kitchen sink approach. It's like, if people say, "Is this in there?" and I say, "Oh no, it's not," I get sad. So I just kept putting things in, and more ingredients in the soup, and I hope it tastes delicious. I think it does. So I'm excited.
I'm sure. And you have written so many other books as well. And how much has your approach not only to the research but to the writing and you as an author has changed since your first one to the one you're doing right now? Has things changed for you, or the experience has been perhaps a little bit more organized, less chaotic, or not really? Still the
No,
same thing?
it's as chaotic as ever. No, oh, it's funny that you use that word, because my husband is a writer as well, and very orderly. And I always say I'm order from chaos. I am someone who, I listen to music when I write. I find myself interrupted. I look things up, and sit there and watch videos, and it all sort of comes out of this madness for whatever the topic is. And so for the last 3.5 years or 4 years, it's been a disco mania here at our house. So I listen to the music every day. I listen while I'm taking a shower. I listen while I'm writing. But my approach to writing, I think I'm a better writer now than I was 30 or 40 years ago. And that it's a more joyful read than anything else I've done. I think people will have a really good time with it. But I think something I've found, and you kind of have to start from your confidence level at near zero every time you start a new project. You think, oh my God, it's like, what do I have to say about this? Am I going to be able to pull it off? Am I going to have an original take on things? Are people going to want to read this? And then you have to sort of get into it. And then, like so many other artists or writers, you go through oh my God, this is so good. And then the next day is, oh my God, this is terrible. Why do you think you can write this? It's like, you're a hack. You should never, retire already, and whatever, and then suddenly, then you'll read it another time. And you're like, and then you fall, so you fall in and out of love with the project, and you just hope, and I did. Yeah, ended with a love story. I ended up loving the book that is coming out. So, but it's a weird thing. People were like, does it get easier? No, it it absolutely doesn't get easier. At least not for me. My guess is everybody who's out there who really cares about what they're putting in, through all of the emotions, and doubts themselves as they're going along. If you're not a little bit scared of it, then you're not doing your job. You should be terrified and staggered by the project, and then fall in love with it, and then climb the mountain and say, yeah, I can do this, and I have something. And even though others have said the stories of disco before, this is my own take on it. I had a fellow writer say to me, every topic is too vast for one person to write the definitive. So bring yourself to the project. And if it's interesting to you, it'll be interesting. And if it's not interesting to you, don't write about it. And so I kind of go to the laptop with that in mind. This book is very much about disco. And even though I'm not mentioned in it except for explaining that I interviewed Donna Summer in 1999, and I wrote about house music in the late 80s, I'm not mentioned really in the book at all. But it's a reflection of my sensibility, very, very much. And it really is a love letter to disco, and I hope a bit of taking the Disco Sucks people to task and saying, you did something on Disco Demolition Night, and your whole Disco Sucks ethos that kind of crashed disco in America by the late 1979. You did a very bad thing. and we will no longer pretend that it was just a radio promotion where where people came and brought disco records and got into a baseball stadium and they blew the records up at halftime, between the two games, and it caused a riot. It's July of 19, and we're not acting like that was not a terrible thing. We're not giving you a free pass. We're saying you did a really racist, homophobic, sexist, misogynist. You blew up those records. That's where the book begins. It begins at the low point. It begins at Disco Demolition. And then it says, well, you thought you won the disco war, but because now it's everywhere, including the Library of... And the stadium at which they did that was torn down in the 90s. So who got the last laugh? So that's my feeling.
No, I think this is an interesting thing to talk about, because it's a part of history that most people don't know, not familiar with, don't know really what happened and what it is. So having a book or opportunity to discuss and open up so people can understand a little bit more, it's part of what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. In telling the history, I really did want to take those people to task, because we were told, here I am. I was there's a ticket stub at the beginning of the book for the Bee Gees concert at Madison Square Garden, and I was 16 years old. That's my ticket stub that I had saved, in my archives, quote unquote, in my boxes of junk. And so that's my actual ticket stub. So I was 16 years old, loving disco, and then suddenly we're told it's not cool anymore. It's this terrible thing. And I don't think we understood why they were saying that. And I hope that people will understand, because people are now, RuPaul talked about it on RuPaul's Drag Race. This documentary talks about it on PBS, Soundtrack of a Revolution documentary. I think we're all saying now that was a rape. There's a guy in the Bee Gees documentary, actually, another to check out, who said it was a racist, homophobic. And when you look at the photos and the footage, it looks like a MAGA rally. It looks like, deport them now is what it looks like, and it's not cool. And to have done that, and you don't get a free pass. And so I wanted to tell that story, but then celebrate disco and show how it's in the DNA of all the dance that dominates radio now, and sort of claim the word and talk about how that word disco, which once poisoned, to use that word, is now used everywhere. I also thought it was interesting that we were told that disco was over. And in some ways it was. Sales were down. But in some ways, the people telling the story that disco was over were part of the problem. They were people who were gunning for disco to be over, because the people who were doing the mainstream music report were white, straight men. And it wasn't about them. And they were mad. So, of course, they celebrated the death, quote unquote, of disco, because now they could go back being in charge. And so the story that got out was that disco was dead. And it's like, well, you know what? It wasn't in England. It wasn't in Australia. It wasn't in Italy. It wasn't everywhere but America. It wasn't over, and never did go away. They didn't have to deal with that backlash. It just became part of the DNA of new wave music, part of DNA of hip hop music, rap music, to the dance pop of today. It just, in the 90s was a disco. There was brilliant dance music. House music, came about the late 80s. It wasn't even a decade later. And house music was what all the cool kids were listening to. But as someone said to me, when I wrote a story about house music, I was working at the Detroit Free Press, and Detroit was the hotbed of techno music. And one of the DJs, one of the Belleville Three, I believe they're known as, said to me that they're not that music journalists of the day are not afraid to be out of step with what Black people like. And that was true. I just didn't realize it at the time, but we were hearing only one side of the story, that disco was dead. But it wasn't, because house music was going on. And in my own personal experience, straight, white, male, and I'm sorry to always be pointing a finger, but naughty, it was your fault. You did this. This is not making it up. I actually had to argue with the music writer, because he said, it's not time to tell this story. And he was trying to get the story I was writing killed. And granted, it was his turf. He was the music, but he wasn't writing about house. He thought it wasn't covering at the time. And so I stepped in, and yeah, I was younger than he was, and at one point I was young. I was younger than he was, and wanted to write about this hip thing because he wasn't going to. I was, and I was writing a thing that was gay people were listening to and black people were listening, and he was neither of those. What did he wanted? What did he? But that's another reason I kind of needed to tell the story. I feel like we have cultural agency now that minorities didn't have 50 years ago when disc beginning, or 45 years ago when Disco Demolition Night happened. We couldn't stand up and say, this is baloney. You can't wholesale disc a genre of music. I mean, when other time have we ever heard someone really try to destroy a genre of music? Never. I mean, it's you might have someone shaking their fist saying, my kids listen to rap and I don't, they use bad words or whatever. But it wasn't, let's all turn on a genre of music, which is what they tried to. And then they made it seem like they'd succeeded. And I guess for a while they did, but not for very long, and they were not covering disco's resurgence, which was shortly after disco's so-called death. That one of the DJs I interviewed said suddenly disco was dead. He said, and then there was this whole wave of music that came in, and you know what it was? Disco. And it was, but they were calling it house music. But still, he was like, it was disco the way we always knew disco in the early 70s and mid 70s before it became a pastime. And he said, it didn't really ever go away. And that's a story that most people know. And I think that's why I wanted to write the disc as well, because it wasn't, we act like, oh, it was a long time later. It was 7 or 8 years, from Disco Demolition Night to house music compilation record. It was like 7 years, so it's like, not exactly. Obviously people are making great music. If you can come out with box sets of vinyl discs, which I have in storage as well because I have everything. But if you could come up with greatest hits or best of compilations 7 years later, great music was being made that no one was writing about.
One thing that I was reading and I was very interested about you is that you have had a very diverse career in entertainment, from writing, comedy, radio show, TV hosting, all of this. You've done almost it all. Was that part of the plan for you? Were you someone who wanted to touch all those different facets of entertainment, or just opportunities coming your way and you just kind of embracing them?
It's a tremendous lack of success, I think. No, I'm kidding. I think I'm someone who was afforded a lot of great opportunities to do a lot of different, and so I kind of surfed through my career. There was no sense of I'm building my brand or I'm doing, or what, I don't know. I was just like, oh, this is interesting. Let's do this now. And I was lucky enough to sort of succeed at a lot of different areas and to be at the right place at the right time. The first TV show I was ever a regular on was The Daily Show, on Comedy Central. So it's sort of, that's like starting at the top. It's and when I got out of college, 9 months after I got out of college, I was a columnist at the Detroit Free Press, which was a huge newspaper. And so I've been very lucky that I've been able to do so many things, but it's certainly not because of planning or trying to touch as many things. It's sort of, oh, that seems fun. I mean, I don't have attention deficit disorder, but I am someone who doesn't like to do things twice, really. I'm sort of like, well, I did radio, now I could do this. The only thing I would do again is television. I loved doing television, and it's, that's the dream for me always, was to do television. I certainly couldn't live without the writing. The writing is what I do. I mean, I'm a writer first and foremost. And I love it, and I don't always like the process of the writing, because sometimes it's a pound of flesh, as they say, or just pulling. Look, I have no hair left. I mean, you're pulling your hair out. But that's my passion always. But there was no plan for the career. But I've gotten to do great things, and I've never sort of been bored. I'm only bored if there's not enough to do, and I mean. That's why I think in some ways that's why I write these books, is, oh, good, it's something to do and it'll keep me busy. And it's like handing a kid an iPad at the restaurant and say, here, go be quiet and play with this while we're trying to eat. I think I'm that little kid in a lot of ways, where I'm like, okay, let me leave me alone, and I'll make this happen. And then when the book comes out, you get to go and do things like this podcast, or go on. I'm going to be on Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen on Bravo. And I'm excited about all of that. So you get to go and talk about that. I have friends who are writers, and they're like, "Oh my God, how do you like that part?" And I was like, "Oh, it's the best." I was like, "You get to go talk about your thing. The writing is done. The hard part's done. Now you just have to go be enthusiastic about what you're doing, and that's easy to do. If you like your baby, you want to show the pictures of it to the world. So that's where I'm kind of at right now. But no, there was no great plan other than to share. If there's a theme to all of it, sharing things that I love and making people laugh. Those are the two things that are go through everything. And there are things in the book that I think people will find, even though it's a serious-ish, but a lighthearted but serious look at the disco phenomenon. And there's some funny stuff in there. Performers talking about what VIP rooms were like, what the basement of Studio 54 was like, the naughty things so there's funny stuff throughout the book. But yeah, that's sort of, I like to enlighten, I like to make people laugh, and most of all, I like to share things I'm enthusiastic. As a writer, I justify my own interests and my own. So this is just another example of that. I loved disco when I was 6. Now that the numbers are reversed, at 61, I still loving disco.
At what point in your life did you realize that perhaps you were excited to share your thoughts, you have something to say, or even that you were someone funny, that people were starting listening to you and pay attention to you and giving you those opportunities? I'm sure it was earned. You talk a lot about I was lucky, but I'm sure all those opportunities really came from merits. You really had to earn it to be there and be in those places. But at what point did you realize that I got something interesting, different, that people like it?
I think at about the same time I was falling in love with disco. I think I thought I was hot spit at that point. I was like in my Jordache jeans and my Kiana print shirt, and I thought I had it all going on. And I love to write. I mean, if you look at my high school yearbook, it says ambition journalist, but it also says my secret dream would be to dance in a chorus line. I said, and I'm a social dancer. I never took a dance class or anything. So even then it was I want to write and I want to perform. So I've kind of always known that that's what I've wanted to do. And then I've just taken it where the opportunities have gone. I have found as I get older that I wish I had the confidence, the blind confidence I had when I was that age. You really do think you're going to set the world on fire in the hugest possible way, when, at least if you're a dreamer, and the way I was like, I am getting out of this little town in New Jersey where I grew up, and I said, I am going Hollywood and I'm going to do my thing. And it's odd because it doesn't always work out exactly the way you want it to, but I'm 5 minutes away from Hollywood right now. So it's not, do I have my own late night talk show? No, I'm not Jimmy Fallon. Have I had a national talk show? Yeah, for 12 years on the radio, I did. So it ends up looking like what you wanted, but in a funhouse mirror. It's a little bit distorted. It's a little bit not exactly as you'd imagined it would be. But I've had a really good, fascinating career. I've met the vast majority of my heroes, particularly my comedic heroes. I remember saying to my husband, there was one period where in the same year I met Elton John, Bette Midler, and Cher. And those are my 3 favorite performers ever. And I thought to myself, well, I don't ever have to go out of the house now. I've met the 3 people I've always wanted to meet, and I'm done. But again, certainly I didn't stop, and I've gotten to meet a lot of people and be influenced by and occasionally work amazing people that I'd always looked up to. And it's been an awful lot of fun. And then you call it work, so they don't stop you. They just say, I'm working. What are you doing? I'm working. And it's like, what are you doing? Listening to disco music. I'm working. I'm who are you on the phone? I'm on the phone with Gloria Gaynor. I'm working. It's working,
Yeah.
quote unquote. But it's not. But yeah, I do. I bring it if I get the opportunity. If people say, "Hey, can you come and do this?" I'm like, "Yes," and you always say yes. That's the actor part of me. Is like, somebody, can you ride a horse? Sure. sure. You know,
Figure it
yeah, I'd
out
love to
later.
ride a horse. Yeah, whatever. But if somebody says come and do this a role on a gay TV show, I was like, okay. I went. Bianca Del Rio, the wonderful drag queen, had a show, and they called me, and they're like, they wouldn't tell me what the part was, and then I get there, and the script says old queen, and I was like, sure, I'll play the old queen. It's like and so whatever people said, come and be on the Daily Show and talk about movies. And so I did. And that led to 6.5 years of movie reviews on the Daily Show. So you just kind of have to go where when you see the door open, step through it. And that's what I've always been good at. I think the thing, though, as you get older, is that you have to start finding the doors. The doors are not as apparent as they were.
Hmm.
It's no longer, I mean, I had a point in my career when I was in my early 30s where the newspaper I was at folded, and the following day I had an offer for a job. I mean, and that is not the way things work anymore. But I was on fire. No, I was no, I mean, I was lucky enough and knew enough people and was well regarded enough for people to call the next. And so it was, I like to say, oh, that it's not like that anymore. When Sirius XM got rid of the channel I was on after 12 years, the first day of unemployment, I was my friend Lisa Lampanelli's for the Grammy Award. So you know what? I guess it still does continue. That was the first day of unemployment was I'm in a tuxedo at 11. She's nominated for a comedy Grammy, and I'm her date. So I guess it still continues where I'm lucky, and then I get to have soft landings when things don't quite go the way I want them. You do have to make your own opportunities the more life goes on.
Yeah, but you have this great attitude about it as well. You're not complaining, you're not pointing finger. You're like, hey, this is the business. This is what I chose to do. And every time I have an opportunity, I'm just gonna go walk through it and give it my best.
Well, I was a big Pee Wee Herman fan, and I did get to meet him too. But he was like saying, "I'm the luckiest boy in the world," and I think there's a little kid piece of me that I feel that way. I mean, I should be selling shoes at a mall in New Jersey, and suddenly, but instead I have this fabulous life, and I see the best theater. I just celebrated my 28th anniversary. I have a wonderful dog. My family. My parents are no longer with us, but they loved me and they love my husband. And so I can't, there's not a lot of reason to complain, is really what I'm saying. I certainly, my husband has to hear it, but you don't have to share it every day. I mean, it's a very, not to be Pollyanna because there are terrible things, but you have to. There's a meme that I like. It says it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but a lot of it is. And I like that because it's like sometimes terrible things happen, but a lot of it is kind of amazing. And so, if you're wandering around the neighborhood and you with your dog and you see a beautiful bird, well, fantastic. If you stop, if there are flowers, take a look at them. Smile at people you're meeting. If there's someone's a hero of yours and they're at a party, go say hello and tell them how much they mean to you. And yeah, I think I treat the world as if it's my own party and I'm the host and I'm just running around and making sure everyone's got enough ice in their drinks and their drinks are freshened up. But it's pretty good. I do count my blessings a lot. And honestly, it's that joke about it beats working. It's like I spent 3 years researching disco. It's like that's not exactly. I'm not working on the highway in 100-degree weather. I'm sitting in my house watching things that I delight in. So it's work, but it's not. So you can't. How can you complain about that? My God. Um,
Well, congratulations on the anniversary, by the way. That's a
Thank
big,
you.
yes, it's exciting. Uh,
28 years is a long time. I mean, the scary thing is that it feels like it's 5 minutes, and you're sort of like, I said, I hope I did a performance piece talking about my anniversary. And I said, I hope in 28 more years, I'm still standing next to him. And then I said, I hope in 28 more years, I'm still standing, period. You hope you're still around. Yeah, and we laugh and we challenge each other and make fun of each other mercilessly. And Yeah, it's pretty great. We still have a good time. I don't know why he still likes me. I'm a handful, but he still likes me. So, and I still
Mm.
like him. He's a pain in the ass too, but I love him. But yeah, we get on quite famously. I'm very lucky. And maybe, although it might just be Stockholm syndrome at this point, we're just whatever that whole thing is, where you're just they're your captor. You know,
Yeah.
you're in love with your jailer. It might be that for both of us too. I don't know, but I always say codependent since 1996. So yeah, my first book had just come out when we met, and so now here we are, 6 or 5 books later. This is the sixth, and he has 4 or 5 of his own now, and yeah, it's fun. We have our little, and he's working on a book on the Love Boat, so we were passing 70s icons back to each other, talking about disco, and then going, "You were on the Love Boat. Here, talk to my husband," and I was handing over the phone, and vice versa. So yeah, we do help each other and look out for each.
You talk a lot about you have the chance to meet wonderful people, a lot of your heroes, and
Yeah.
people that inspire you and motivated you. Looking at the industry today, the entertainment, music, cinema, all of it, the spectrum, even let's say social media, are there people that influences you, or you're excited about that you're looking forward to see what they're doing?
Yeah, certainly. I'm always fascinated by this duet between Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga that just came out. I was like, "Ooh, what's this? Let's look and see what's going on." There's an EDM called Sophie Tucker, this duo that I love, and I've been following them for years. I mean, they're kind of a thing, but if they ever are huge and mainstream, I was on it first. I've been listening to them since they first started. And yeah, so I try and keep abreast with music. I think it's funny that there's so much disco stuff now. With you hear Dua Lipa, and it might as well be 1979 on the radio. I mean, her stuff is so disco sounding. So I look with pop music to see what's going on, and I'm always fascinated by that. I look at fashion, and I don't hate when people just make fun of unwearable stuff. It's like, it's not about that. I covered fashion for 12 to 15 years. I wrote about fashion. It's like, don't sit there and say, well, we're all going to be wearing garbage bags now, all that stuff. It's like, don't be a jerk. It's like they're making, they're expressing themselves. They're not telling you to really go with it. Although now people actually wear the stuff that is the most outrageous. They didn't used to, but now everyone thinks they're outrageous. But you kind of have to pay attention. I don't like when young people say, "Oh, that happened before I was born," as if that's a past. I mean, okay, I was born 61 years ago, and you know what? Everything interesting happened before I was born. So it's so the most interesting stuff all had happened. This is the way you have to look at it. And so you have to learn about that. But I also don't like when people who are older don't pay attention to what's going on now, because there's great stuff out. Fascinated, like Orville Peck. I'm fascinated with the mask, and the fringe. Well, they don't fringe anymore, but I'm fascinated with that, and people coming up and doing stuff, and you have to pay attention. You have to read. You have to be intellectually curious, or you might as well just crawl in a hole and pull the dirt in after you. It's like, what fun is it if you're not going to learn about new things? Yes, I'm very much someone who has a big nostalgic streak, but I certainly don't think things used to be better. I don't sit around and pine for. I love the disco music of the 70s, but I don't think we need to necessarily look at it and say, that was the greatest moment of my life. I don't know how do you know what the greatest moment of your life is until it's over? And you're over, you can go, well, that turned out to be the greatest moment. Oh, well, but you got to look forward and figure out, well, what's my next trick? What am I going to do to stay valid for another 10 years? Or 5 years or 3, whatever. You finish the book and suddenly you're thinking, what the hell am I going to write next? And that's where I'm at now. And I kind of think I know what I want to do, but I'm not sure. If anyone will want to read it or buy it. But you gotta look forward, even while you're appreciating the past. I mean, I'm streaming some of the latest stuff, although not as much of the trendiest. There are shows where like, are you watching The Bear? It's like, no, I'm not. But I'm watching Policewoman from 1976. Which I am. I've been binging Policewoman from the 70s because there was a disco episode of that. the disco killer. So, but but I also am watching, Emily in Paris and Only Murders in the Building, and there is stuff that's brand new that I am watching. But I don't think you should look at the past. Yeah, I think you should appreciate the past, but I don't think you should live in it. Let's put it that way. And so I don't. But I do think both groups need to be kicked in the butt. If I have to know who Nicki Minaj is, you have to know who Ella Fitzgerald is. And hey, Grandpa, look at, listen to this new record. You're going to love it, and I think that, or go and see a new movie. Although movies are harder for me because I really do like old. I like old, okay, more than anything. I like old good movies, but I really like old bad movies. And so, if there's a terrible horror movie, some exploitation movie, I'm all over it. My husband won't watch it, but I sit there and it's a topless woman bouncing around on a hoppity hop. I'm there. I watched
Sign
movie.
me up.
Yes, that was no. There was a movie that was a Batman spoof, and most of it, they don't know anything about it. It was this woman, just in a Batman outfit with no bra, just bouncing on a hoppity hop. And it's sort of like, this is a movie. I'm fascinated with. That's the kind of thing that I'm just like, who did this? When you look at you're crazier than I am. Look at look at the movie you made. So I'm fascinated by by good bad, and as I was saying with disco, I like the good and I like the good bad. The bad is hard, but the good bad. I mean, I do a whole takeout. People are like, is the Ethel Merman disco album? For people who don't know, it's a real thing. Ethel Merman, the queen of Broadway musical, had one foot in the grave, and she's doing this disco album, and she said, I'm a disco mama now. And they took out ads that said, Donna's Summer, eat your heart out. Honestly, I have a high tolerance, as I've been saying, a high tolerance for stuff that's bad. I can't listen to her whole record, and it's only like 6 tracks or 7 tracks. You can't hear the whole thing. You're like, oh my God. Meanwhile, we went to see the performer Ben Platt, and they're playing the Ethel Merman disco album while we're waiting for the show to start. And I was like, boy, this has come around. I mean, he wasn't born when that album came out. And now here we are sitting in an amphitheater at the Greek Theater, and we're listening to Ethel singing There's No Business Like Show Business, beat behind it, so it all kind of comes around. I think the exciting thing is that everything, whether it's YouTube or downloading music or Spotify or whatever you're using, you can find clips. I mean, I can't imagine going back to a time when you can't find a clip of some TV moment or some movie moment that you remember. And I wrote books before we had the internet, and I don't know how we did it, other than with memory of things. But you couldn't. Now I can go tell you exactly what Cher said to Elton John on that episode of the Cher Show with Bette Midler and what they talked about. I can go find the exact clip and watch it and tell you, exactly what it was. You used to have to remember lines, and if they were important enough to write about, they were up here. They weren't researchable. You couldn't go and fact check it. But I love that you can download any piece of music. Although I still find disco records you can't download. I'm sort of like, oh, come on. How can this not have made the transition to the digital age, But there's still some. So it's fun that it's pop culture buffet that you can just go and gorge yourself at.
Well, I'm excited because now it's a part of the show that I ask every guest the same questions, and I'm dying to hear your recommendations, okay? Because we talk a lot about bad movies, great movies, good things that you enjoy. So 3 things I need you to recommend it to us.
Okay.
First, a book, something to read, can be one of your favorites or, your own book, of course. Whatever you feel like, we should check it out. Also, usually I say a movie, a TV show, documentary. Actually, I'm going to include another one.
Okay.
An album, something to listen to. And last and not least, a guest. Who should we have here next on the show?
Let's see. All right, I will. Which is first? Are we saying a book? Is a
book
first?
Yeah.
Okay. The last book that I read and got so taken with that I was upset when I was a memoir by the performer and writer and playwright Charles Busch called Leading Lady. And he is a drag performer, but also a Tony-nominated playwright. And he's a buddy of mine. And not close, but someone who's always been good to me and whose career I've followed for decades. And so Leading Lady was one of those memoirs about growing up as the misunderstood child who was sort of sensitive and dreamt of a more fabulous, more inclusive world, and then went and found it. And so I identified with those feelings, and I knew the time that he was writing about in New York, but to see it through his eyes was kind of amazing to see what his New York was like, because it was a time when I was young and living. And so Leading Lady by Charles Bush. That's the book that I did. That I once in a while you're reading and you kind of, it's like when you're running out of cookies, you kind of eat them slower. It was the book. I was like, I don't want to be done with this book. I want to live in this book for another week or two. And so I was really enjoying that. So that's my book.
All right.
What's
the next
next
one
thing?
would be a TV, a movie, something to watch.
I just watched I binged the first 5, I guess it was, Emily in Paris episode, and it is as gettable as could be. And we were watching the recap, Emily in Paris, from earlier the season before, and we were like, did we see this? And we did, but it was it was so forgettable. Now that's the downside. The upside is it's so delicious. It is to watch. The clothes, she went to Paris with one suitcase. She's got 4,000 couture outfits. Everybody's cute. Everybody has 3 boyfriends that love them. It's such a, it's like going on a pleasure trip without leaving your living room. I mean, you feel like you're in Paris, and you want to eat cheese and drink wine and appreciate the prune in a way that only the French can, and wear fabulous clothes. And I don't smoke, but you go to France, you're like, I want to smoke now. You're like, so it's one of those things. But I just love that there's always somewhere to wear a fabulous outfit. There's always a fabulous outfit to wear, and there are always 2 guys vying for you. I think it's hilarious. Cotton candy, and so you don't remember. It's in, it's out. Boy, is it fun while you're watching it. So that was the latest binge, and I can't wait for the new season of Only Murders in the Building, because I love watching Steve Martin and Martin Short just being crazy, and you can tell that they're good friends in person. And Selena Gomez is the girl, right? She's fantastic.
Yes, it's
So
a great show.
yes, I love it. So
Now, something to listen to, or
um,
even maybe a better idea. As someone is
yes.
reading your book, what should be the background, the soundtrack for your book?
I would say buy a really good disco compilation. Now that's what I call disco, or something like that, where it's a disco compilation. Listen to that. But if you're just going to pick one artist, I think you should definitely listen to some Sylvester and some Chic and some Donna Summer. Definitely, that's what I would do. And then drop in a few anthems like I Will Survive, Don't Leave Me This Way, and some empowerment anthems like that. But if you don't know Sylvester, he's the one to anyone who can say, no, I'm the queen of disco, not Donna Summer. And some people are like, you might be right. I think he's worth listening to. So if you don't know Sylvester, but just hunker down and listen to some good. And the Saturday Night Fever. If you've never heard all of the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack, oh my God, it's insane. And they wrote it in a heartbeat. The Bee Gees, so many of the songs, like one weekend, and they're spectacular. They're as good as they ever were. If you listen to those, you've kind of got a good taste. And then you can go more far afield and do. Even at the Olympics, they played. There's a disco song by Cerrone called Supernature, and they were playing it during a light show at the Eiffel Tower. Okay, it was spectacular. So disco's everywhere. So keep your eyes open. That's what I would say.
And the last one is a guess. Who should we be here invite to be in the show next?
Well, I might as well keep it in the family. When my husband's next book about the Love Boat comes out, you should have Jim Colucci on, because he is the most knowledgeable TV person I know. He knows more about television than most people will ever learn. And so when his book comes out, I would say do that. And he's working on a new one as beyond that. So yeah, we've got stuff coming from the DeCaro Colucci factory here, and we have more things coming. So that's who I would say. But sooner than that, my friend Susan Mulcahy has a book coming out called Paper of Record, and I just saw that was announced, and that's coming out in the fall. And she is really someone who was worked at the New York Post and has amazing journalism stories. It's an oral history of the New York and tabloid journalism, and you might want to have her on. She's fantastic. So
I
she's
love those
very smart,
suggestions.
and I
Yeah.
love her. So that those are my two. So it's an old friend and my old husband. So who's not
I love it.
better?
Done. We can make that work for sure. Thank you so much. Again, I have the book is on the way. I haven't had the chance to see it yet, like you, but I'm excited to have it here and then go through it and read a little bit more and learn a little bit about the history, and all the exciting, perhaps even you mentioned before, some of the sides that sometimes we wanted to ignore of the time that meant so much to so many people. And for you, for taking the time to join me today to share a little bit about your process, your passion, and even your excitement for bad movies and and all
Well,
of those things. I want to thank you so much and I appreciate you for taking the time.
oh, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for having me on. And as I say at the end of the introduction to the disco music, movies, and mania under the mirror ball, now let's party a little bit. So that's the end of the introduction, and that's the way I feel about it. It's not only let's learn something, but let's party a little bit. So that's my goal is to disco dance into from now until into 2025 and beyond. So hitting that dance floor. And thanks for having me on.
Of course, the book is going to be out now. By the time this goes be available, the book is going to be available for everybody. So everybody should go check it out. What else people can go follow you or learn more about you? Just drop a little bit of how people can interact with you as well.
I was going to say, if you need a good laugh, follow me, particularly on Instagram at Caro Show, and it's naughty, definitely, but it's childish and stupid and fun, and I do a lot of visual jokes that are on there, and also share my enthusiasm for things as well. But a lot of it is just sort of to brighten up your day, and I spend entirely too much time on it. If I, it's like write for an hour, spend 3 hours on Instagram. That's what how this book got finished. I don't know, because really, if I hadn't been on Instagram, we'd have had this conversation 2 years ago, I think, because I would have gotten the book finished. But yeah, I would say there, or you can go to frankdecaro.com as well, and that'll, it's all those websites are boring now. We used to think that was I have my own website. Instagram at Frank DeCaro Show. So that's the place, and you can always DM me, and I write back.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You feel better, and thanks for having me on, and good luck with everything. And if I ever get a new fireplace, I want it to look exactly like the one behind you.
I told you I can't take no credit. The wife is just amazing at it, and we do have a beautiful place. The idea was, we should build you a studio for the podcast. I'm like, why? I'm not gonna be any better than this, so I'll just keep doing it here.
I maybe I should blur my background. I want to get a fireplace background now and put it behind me at all times. I'm doing that now. I'm gonna steal that.
How
So,
lovely.
hey, thank you so very much.